The Last Adventure of the Brigadier. I will tell you no more stories, my dear friends. It is said that man is like the hare, which runs in a circle and comes back to die at the point from which it started. Gascony has been calling to me of late. I see the blue Garonne winding among the vineyards, and the bluer ocean towards which its waters sweep. I see the old town also, and the bristle of masts from the side of the long stone quay. My heart hungers for the breath of my native air and the warm glow of my native sun. Here in Paris are my friends, my occupations, my pleasures. There all who have known me are in their grave, and yet the southwest wind, as it rattles on my windows, seems always to be the strong voice of the motherland, calling her child back to that bosom into which I am ready to sink. I have played my part in my time. The time has passed. I must pass also. Nay, dear friends, do not look sad, for what can be happier than a life completed in honour and made beautiful with friendship and love? And yet it is solemn also when a man approaches the end of the long road and sees the turning which leads him into the unknown. But the Emperor and all his marshals have ridden round that dark turning and passed into the beyond. My hussars, too. There are not 50 men who are not waiting yonder. I must go. But on this, the last night, I will tell you that which is more than a tale. It is a great historical secret. My lips have been sealed, but I see no reason why I should not leave behind me some account of this remarkable adventure, which must otherwise be entirely lost, since I, and only I, of all living men, have a knowledge of the facts. I will ask you to go back with me to the year 1821. In that year, our great emperor had been absent from us for 6 years, and only now and then, from over the seas, we heard some whisper which showed that he was still alive. You cannot think what a weight it was upon our hearts for us who loved him, to think of him in captivity, eating his giant soul out upon that lonely island. From the moment we rose until we closed our eyes in sleep, the thought was always with us, and we felt dishonoured that he, our chief and master, should be so humiliated without our being able to move a hand to help him. There were many who would most willingly have laid down the remainder of their lives to bring him a little ease, and yet all that we could do was to sit and grumble in our cafes and stare at the map, counting up the leagues of water which lay between us. It seemed that he might have been in the moon for all that we could do to help him. But that was only because we were all soldiers and knew nothing of the sea. Of course, we had our own little troubles to make us bitter, as well as the wrongs of our emperor. There were many of us who had held high rank, and would hold it again if he came back to his own. We had not found it possible to take service under the white flag of the Bourbons, or to take an oath which might turn our sabres against the man whom we loved. So we found ourselves with neither work nor money. What could we do save gather together and gossip and grumble, while those who had a little paid the score, and those who had nothing shared the bottle? Now and then, if we were lucky, we managed to pick a quarrel with one of the gardes du corps, and if we left him on his hack in the Bois, we felt that we had struck a blow for Napoleon once again. They came to know our haunts in time, and they avoided them as if they had been hornets' nests. There was one of these, the sign of the great man, in the Rue Varennes, which was frequented by several of the more distinguished and younger Napoleonic officers. Nearly all of us had been colonels or aides-de-camp, and when any man of less distinction came among us, we generally made him feel that he had taken a liberty. There were Captain Lepine, who had won the Medal of Honor at Leipzig, Colonel Bonnet, aide-de-camp to MacDonald, Colonel Jourdain, whose fame in the army was hardly second to my own, Sabatier of my own hussars, Meunier of the Red Lancers, Le Breton of the Guards, and a dozen others. Every night we met and talked, played dominoes, drank a glass or two, and wondered how long it would be before the Emperor would be back, and we at the head of our regiments once more. The Bourbons had already lost any hold they ever had upon the country, as was shown a few years afterward, when Paris rose against them, and they were hunted for the third time out of France. Napoleon had but to show himself on the coast, and he would have marched without firing a musket to the capital, exactly as he had done when he came back from Elba. Well, when affairs were in this state, there arrived one night in February, in our café, a most singular little man. He was short, but exceedingly broad, with huge shoulders, and a head which was a deformity, so large was it. His heavy brown face was scarred with white streaks in a most extraordinary manner, and he had grizzled whiskers such as seamen wear. 2 gold earrings in his ears, and plentiful tattooing upon his hands and arms, told us that he was of the sea, before he introduced himself to us as Captain Forno of the Emperor's Navy. He had letters of introduction to 2 of our number, and there could be no doubt that he was devoted to the cause. He won our respect, too, for he had seen as much fighting as any of us, and the burns upon his face were caused by his standing to his post upon the Orient at the Battle of the Nile, until the vessel blew up underneath him. Yet he would say little about himself, but he sat in the corner of the café watching us all, with a wonderfully sharp pair of eyes, and listening intently to our talk. One night I was leaving the café when Captain Forno followed me, and touching me on the arm, he led me, without saying a word, for some distance, until we reached his lodgings. "I wish to have a chat with you," said he, and so conducted me up the stairs to his room. There he lit a lamp and handed me a sheet of paper, which he took from an envelope in his bureau. It was dated a few months before, from the palace of Schönbrunn in Vienna. "Captain Forno is acting in the highest interests of the Emperor Napoleon. Those who love the Emperor should obey him without question. Marie-Louise." That is what I read. I was familiar with the signature of the Empress, and I could not doubt that this was genuine. "Well," said he, "are you satisfied as to my credentials?" "Entirely." "Are you prepared to take your orders from me?" "This document leaves me no choice." "Good. In the first place, I understand from something you said in the café that you can speak English." "Yes, I can." "Let me hear you do so." I said in English, "Whenever the Emperor needs the help of Etienne Gerard, I am ready night and day to give my life in his service." Captain Forno smiled. "It is funny English," said he, "but still it is better than no English. For my own part, I speak English like an Englishman. It is all that I have to show for 6 years spent in an English prison. Now I will tell you why I have come to Paris. I have come in order to choose an agent who will help me in a matter which affects the interests of the Emperor. I was told that it was at the cafe of the great man that I would find the pick of his old officers, and that I could rely upon every man there being devoted to his interests. I studied you all, therefore, and I have come to the conclusion that you are the one who is most suited to my purpose. I acknowledged the compliment. What is it that you wish me to do? I asked. Merely to keep me company for a few months, said he. You must know that after my release in England I settled down there, married an English wife, and rose to command a small English merchant ship, in which I have made several voyages from Southampton to the Guinea coast. They look on me there as an Englishman. You can understand, however, that with my feelings about the Emperor, I am lonely sometimes, and that it would be an advantage to me to have a companion who could sympathize with my thoughts. One gets very bored on these long voyages, and I would make it worth your while to share my cabin. He looked hard at me with his shrewd grey eyes all the time that he was uttering this rigmarole, and I gave him a glance in return, which showed him that he was not dealing with a fool. He took out a canvas bag full of money. There are £100 in gold in this bag. You will be able to buy some comforts for your voyage. I should recommend you to get them in Southampton, whence we will start in 10 days. The name of the vessel is the Black Swan. I return to Southampton tomorrow, and I shall hope to see you in the course of the next week. Come now, said I, tell me frankly what is the destination of our voyage. Oh, didn't I tell you? He answered. We are bound for the Guinea coast of Africa. Then how can that be in the highest interests of the Emperor? I asked. It is in his highest interests that you ask no indiscreet questions, and I give no indiscreet replies, he answered sharply. So he brought the interview to an end, and I found myself back in my lodgings, with nothing save this bag of gold, to show that this singular interview had indeed taken place. There was every reason why I should see the adventure to a conclusion, and so within a week I was on my way to England. I passed from St-Malo to Southampton, and on inquiry at the docks, I had no difficulty in finding the Black Swan, a neat little vessel of a shape which is called, as I learned afterward, a brig. There was Captain Forno himself upon the deck, and 7 or 8 rough fellows hard at work grooming her and making her ready for sea. He greeted me and led me down to his cabin. You are plain Mr. Gerard now, said he, and a Channel Islander. I would be obliged to you if you would kindly forget your military ways and drop your cavalry swagger when you walk up and down my deck. A beard, too, would seem more sailor-like than those moustaches. I was horrified by his words, but after all there are no ladies on the high seas, and what did it matter? He rang for the steward. Gustave, said he, you will pay every attention to my friend, Monsieur Etienne Gerard, who makes this voyage with us. This is Gustave Kerouan, my Breton steward, he explained, and you are very safe in his hands. This steward, with his harsh face and stern eyes, looked a very warlike person for so peaceful an employment. I said nothing, however, though you may guess that I kept my eyes open. A berth had been prepared for me next the cabin, which would have seemed comfortable enough had it not contrasted with the extraordinary splendour of Forno's quarters. He was certainly a most luxurious person, for his room was new fitted with velvet and silver, in a way which would have suited the yacht of a noble better than a little West African trader. So thought the mate, Mr. Burns, who could not hide his amusement and contempt whenever he looked at it. This fellow, a big solid red-headed Englishman, had the other berth connected with the cabin. There was a second mate named Turner, who lodged in the middle of the ship, and there were 9 men and 1 boy in the crew, 3 of whom, as I was informed by Mr. Burns, were Channel Islanders, like myself. This Burns, the first mate, was much interested to know why I was coming with them. "I come for pleasure," said I. He stared at me. "Ever been to the West Coast?" he asked. I said that I had not. "I thought not," said he. "You'll never come again for that reason, anyhow." Some 3 days after my arrival, we untied the ropes by which the ship was tethered, and we set off upon our journey. I was never a good sailor, and I may confess that we were far out of sight of any land before I was able to venture upon deck. At last, however, upon the 5th day, I drank the soup which the good Kerouan brought me, and I was able to crawl from my bunk and up the stair. The fresh air revived me, and from that time onward I accommodated myself to the motion of the vessel. My beard had begun to grow also, and I have no doubt that I should have made as fine a sailor as I have a soldier, had I chanced to be born to that branch of the service. I learned to pull the ropes which hoisted the sails, and also to haul round the long sticks to which they are attached. For the most part, however, my duties were to play écarté with Captain Forno, and to act as his companion. It was not strange that he should need one, for neither of his mates could read or write, though each of them was an excellent seaman. If our captain had died suddenly, I cannot imagine how we should have found our way in that waste of waters, for it was only he who had the knowledge which enabled him to mark our place upon the chart. He had this fixed upon the cabin wall, and every day he put our course upon it, so that we could see at a glance how far we were from our destination. It was wonderful how well he could calculate it. For one morning he said that we should see the Cape Verde light that very night, and there it was, sure enough, upon our left front, the moment that darkness came. Next day, however, the land was out of sight, and Burns, the mate, explained to me that we should see no more until we came to our port in the Gulf of Biafra. Every day we flew south with a favouring wind, and always at noon the pin upon the chart was moved nearer and nearer to the African coast. I may explain that palm oil was the cargo which we were in search of, and that our own lading consisted of coloured cloths, old muskets, and such other trifles as the English sell to the savages. At last the wind, which had followed us so long, died away, and for several days we drifted about on a calm and oily sea, under a sun which brought the pitch bubbling out between the planks upon the deck. We turned and turned our sails to catch every wandering puff, until at last we came out of this belt of calm, and ran south again with a brisk breeze, the sea all round us being alive with flying fishes. For some days Burns appeared to be uneasy, and I observed him continually shading his eyes with his hand, and staring at the horizon as if he were looking for land. Twice I caught him with his red head against the chart in the cabin, gazing at that pin, which was always approaching and yet never reaching the African coast. At last, one evening, as Captain Forno and I were playing écarté in the cabin, the mate entered with an angry look upon his sunburned face. "I beg your pardon, Captain Forno," said he, "but do you know what course the man at the wheel is steering?" "Due south," the captain answered, with his eyes fixed upon his cards. "And he should be steering due east. How do you make that out?" The mate gave an angry growl. "I may not have much education," said he, "but let me tell you this, Captain Forno. I've sailed these waters since I was a little nipper of 10, and I know the line when I'm on it, and I know the doldrums, and I know how to find my way to the oil rivers. We are south of the line now, and we should be steering due east instead of due south, if your port is the port that the owners sent you to." "Excuse me, Mr. Gerard, just remember that it is my lead," said the captain, laying down his cards. "Come to the map here, Mr. Burns, and I will give you a lesson in practical navigation. Here is the trade wind from the southwest, and here is the line, and here is the port that we want to make, and here is a man who will have his own way aboard his own ship." As he spoke, he seized the unfortunate mate by the throat and squeezed him until he was nearly senseless. Kerouan, the steward, had rushed in with a rope, and between them they gagged and trussed the man, so that he was utterly helpless. "There is one of our Frenchmen at the wheel. We had best put the mate overboard," said the steward. "That is safest," said Captain Forno. But that was more than I could stand. Nothing would persuade me to agree to the death of a helpless man. With a bad grace, Captain Forno consented to spare him, and we carried him to the afterhold, which lay under the cabin. There he was laid among the bales of Manchester cloth. "It is not worth while to put down the hatch," said Captain Forno. "Gustav, go to Mr. Turner and tell him that I would like to have a word with him." The unsuspecting second mate entered the cabin, and was instantly gagged and secured, as Burns had been. He was carried down and laid beside his comrade. The hatch was then replaced. "Our hands have been forced by that red-headed dolt," said the captain, "and I have had to explode my mine before I wished. However, there is no great harm done, and it will not seriously disarrange my plans. Kerouan, you will take a keg of rum forward to the crew and tell them that the captain gives it to them to drink his health on the occasion of crossing the line. They will know no better. As to our own fellows, bring them down to your pantry, so that we may be sure that they are ready for business. Now, Colonel Gerard, with your permission, we will resume our game of écarté. It is one of those occasions which one does not forget. This captain, who was a man of iron, shuffled and cut, dealt and played, as if he were in his café. From below we heard the inarticulate murmurings of the two mates, half smothered by the handkerchiefs which gagged them. Outside the timbers creaked, and the sails hummed under the brisk breeze which was sweeping us upon our way. Amid the splash of the waves and the whistle of the wind we heard the wild cheers and shoutings of the English sailors as they broached the keg of rum. We played 6 games, and then the captain rose. "I think they are ready for us now," said he. He took a brace of pistols from a locker, and he handed one of them to me. But we had no need to fear resistance, for there was no one to resist. The Englishman of those days, whether soldier or sailor, was an incorrigible drunkard. Without drink he was a brave and good man, but if drink were laid before him, it was a perfect madness. Nothing could induce him to take it with moderation. In the dim light of the den which they inhabited, 5 senseless figures, and 2 shouting, swearing, singing madmen, represented the crew of the Black Swan. Coils of rope were brought forward by the steward, and with the help of 2 French seamen, the third was at the wheel, we secured the drunkards and tied them up, so that it was impossible for them to speak or move. They were placed under the fore-hatch, as their officers had been under the after one, and Kerouan was directed twice a day to give them food and drink. So at last we found that the Black Swan was entirely our own. Had there been bad weather, I do not know what we should have done, but we still went gaily upon our way with a wind which was strong enough to drive us swiftly south, but not strong enough to cause us alarm. On the evening of the 3rd day I found Captain Forno gazing eagerly out from the platform in front of the vessel. "Look, Gerard, look!" he cried, and pointed over the pole which stuck out in front. A light blue sky rose from a dark blue sea, and far away, at the point where they met, was a shadowy something like a cloud, but more definite in shape. "What is it?" I cried. "It is land." "And what land?" I strained my ears for the answer, and yet I knew already what the answer would be. "It is St. Helena." Here, then, was the island of my dreams. Here was the cage where our great eagle of France was confined. All those thousands of leagues of water had not sufficed to keep Gerard from the master whom he loved. There he was, there on that cloud bank yonder over the dark blue sea. How my eyes devoured it, how my soul flew in front of the vessel, flew on and on to tell him that he was not forgotten, that after many days one faithful servant was coming to his side. Every instant the dark blur upon the water grew harder and clearer. Soon I could see plainly enough that it was indeed a mountainous island. The night fell, but still I knelt upon the deck, with my eyes fixed upon the darkness which covered the spot where I knew that the great Emperor was. An hour passed, and another one, and then suddenly a golden twinkling light shone out exactly ahead of us. It was the light of the window of some house, perhaps of his house. It could not be more than a mile or two away. Oh, how I held out my hands to it! They were the hands of Etienne Gerard. But it was for all France that they were held out. Every light had been extinguished aboard our ship, and presently, at the direction of Captain Forno, we all pulled upon one of the ropes, which had the effect of swinging round one of the sticks above us, and so stopping the vessel. Then he asked me to step down to the cabin. "You understand everything now, Colonel Gerard," said he, "and you will forgive me if I did not take you into my complete confidence before. In a matter of such importance I make no man my confidant. I have long planned the rescue of the Emperor, and my remaining in England and joining their merchant service was entirely with that design. All has worked out exactly as I expected. I have made several successful voyages to the west coast of Africa, so that there was no difficulty in my obtaining the command of this one. One by one I got these old French man-of-war's men among the hands. As to you, I was anxious to have one tried fighting man in case of resistance, and I also desired to have a fitting companion for the Emperor during his long homeward voyage. My cabin is already fitted up for his use. I trust that before tomorrow morning he will be inside it, and we out of sight of this accursed island." You can think of my emotion, my friends, as I listened to these words. I embraced the brave Forno, and implored him to tell me how I could assist him. "I must leave it all in your hands," said he. "Would that I could have been the first to pay him homage, but it would not be wise for me to go. The glass is falling, there is a storm brewing, and we have the land under our lee. Besides, there are 3 English cruisers near the island, which may be upon us at any moment. It is for me, therefore, to guard the ship, and for you to bring off the Emperor." I thrilled at the words. "Give me your instructions," I cried. "I can only spare you one man, for already I can hardly pull round the yards," said he. "One of the boats has been lowered, and this man will row you ashore and await your return. The light which you see is indeed the light of Longwood. All who are in the house are your friends, and all may be depended upon to aid the Emperor's escape. There is a cordon of English sentries, but they are not very near to the house. Once you have got as far as that, you will convey our plans to the Emperor, guide him down to the boat, and bring him on board." The Emperor himself could not have given his instructions more shortly and clearly. There was not a moment to be lost. The boat with the seamen was waiting alongside. I stepped into it, and an instant afterward we had pushed off. Our little boat danced over the dark waters, but always shining before my eyes was the light of Longwood, the light of the Emperor, the star of hope. Presently the bottom of the boat grated upon the pebbles of the beach. It was a deserted cove, and no challenge from a sentry came to disturb us. I left the seamen by the boat, and I began to climb the hillside. There was a goat track winding in and out among the rocks, so I had no difficulty in finding my way. It stands to reason that all paths in St. Helena would lead to the Emperor. I came to a gate. No sentry, and I passed through. Another gate. Still no sentry. I wondered what had become of this cordon of which Forno had spoken. I had come now to the top of my climb, for there was the light burning steadily right in front of me. I concealed myself and took a good look round, but still I could see no sign of the enemy. As I approached, I saw the house, a long, low building with a veranda. A man was walking up and down upon the path in front. I crept nearer and had a look at him. Perhaps it was this cursed Hudson Lowe. What a triumph if I could not only rescue the Emperor, but also avenge him. But it was more likely that this man was an English sentry. I crept nearer still, and the man stopped in front of the lighted window, so that I could see him. No, it was no soldier, but a priest. I wondered what such a man could be doing there at 2 a.m. Was he French or English? If he were one of the household, I might take him into my confidence. If he were English, he might ruin all my plans. I crept a little nearer still, and at that moment he entered the house, a flood of light pouring out through the open door. All was clear for me now, and I understood that not an instant was to be lost. Bending myself double, I ran swiftly forward to the lighted window. Raising my head, I peeped through, and there was the Emperor lying dead before me. My friends, I fell down upon the gravel walk, as senseless as if a bullet had passed through my brain. So great was the shock that I wonder that I survived it. And yet in half an hour I had staggered to my feet again, shivering in every limb, my teeth chattering, and there I stood, staring with the eyes of a maniac into that room of death. He lay upon a bier in the centre of the chamber, calm, composed, majestic, his face full of that reserve power which lightened our hearts upon the day of battle. A half-smile was fixed upon his pale lips, and his eyes, half opened, seemed to be turned on mine. He was stouter than when I had seen him at Waterloo, and there was a gentleness of expression which I had never seen in life. On either side of him burned rows of candles, and this was the beacon which had welcomed us at sea, which had guided me over the water, and which I had hailed as my star of hope. Dimly I became conscious that many people were kneeling in the room, the little court, men and women who had shared his fortunes, Bertrand, his wife, the priest, Montauban, all were there. I would have prayed too, but my heart was too heavy and bitter for prayer. And yet I must leave, and I could not leave him without a sign, regardless of whether I was seen or not. I drew myself erect before my dead leader, brought my heels together, and raised my hand in a last salute. Then I turned and hurried off through the darkness, with the pictures of the wan, smiling lips and the steady grey eyes dancing always before me. It had seemed to me but a little time that I had been away, and yet the boatman told me that it was hours. Only when he spoke of it did I observe that the wind was blowing half a gale from the sea, and that the waves were roaring in upon the beach. Twice we tried to push out our little boat, and twice it was thrown back by the sea. The third time a great wave filled it and stove the bottom. Helplessly we waited beside it until the dawn broke, to show a raging sea and a flying scud above it. There was no sign of the black swan. Climbing the hill we looked down, but on all the great torn expanse of the ocean there was no gleam of a sail. She was gone. Whether she had sunk, or whether she was recaptured by her English crew, or what strange fate may have been in store for her, I do not know. Never again in this life did I see Captain Forno to tell him the result of my mission. For my own part I gave myself up to the English, my boatman and I pretending that we were the only survivors of a lost vessel, though indeed there was no pretence in the matter. At the hands of their officers I received that generous hospitality which I have always encountered, but it was many a long month before I could get a passage back to the dear land, outside of which there can be no happiness, for so true a Frenchman as myself. And so I tell you in one evening how I bade good-bye to my master. And I take my leave also of you, my kind friends, who have listened so patiently to the long-winded stories of an old, broken soldier. Russia, Italy, Germany, Spain, Portugal, and England. You have gone with me to all these countries, and you have seen through my dim eyes something of the sparkle and splendour of those great days. And I have brought back to you some shadow of those men whose tread shook the earth. Treasure it in your minds, and pass it on to your children, for the memory of a great age is the most precious treasure that a nation can possess. As the tree is nurtured by its own cast leaves, so it is these dead men and vanished days, which may bring out another blossoming of heroes, of rulers, and of sages. I go to Gascony, but my words stay here in your memory, and long after Etienne Gerard is forgotten, a heart may be warmed, or a spirit braced, by some faint echo of the words that he has spoken. Gentlemen, an old soldier salutes you, and bids you farewell. That is the end of The Last Adventure of the Brigadier, from The Adventures of Gerard, by Arthur Conan Doyle. Read by Greg Wagland for Magpie Audio 2024. Thank you very much for listening.